Welcome to Firewise in the Classroom, Chapter 1. What is wildland fire? When you think of the term wildland fire, what comes to mind? What do you see, or hear, or smell? Where do you imagine wildland fire occurring? Take a few minutes and write down your ideas in your student guide. Pause this video if you need to. So when most people think of wildland fire, they think of very large and very destructive fires that they're seeing and hearing about on TV or online. For instance, the 2018 Camp Fire in California. This was a fire so large that you could see it from satellite, and the smoke plume wrapped all the way around the globe after several days. You may think of a charred landscape with only a few things remaining, something black and something barren. That can be the case for a lot of wildland fires, but the majority of wildland fire on the landscape is small. It still affects humans and their work and living and playing habits, but it may not be as destructive as the very large ones that make the national news. In fact, a great majority of fires, 95% of fires, start out and end as something pretty small, like this roadside fire. In any given year in the US, there are 67,000 wildland fires, burning about 7 million acres. An acre is about the size of a football field. In Minnesota, on an average year, there are about 1,200 fires that are burning about 30,000 acres. Some fires may be intentionally set, whether it be by natural resource specialists or farmers or highway personnel. These fires are intended to remove fire vegetation from the landscape so that if a wildland fire does come through the area, there's a fire break, a place where the fire will naturally stop. So we used to call fires on the landscape forest fires or wildfires. We expected those to take place where there were no people and no buildings. The last 20 or even 30 years, we've expanded our definition of fire on the landscape, and we now call it wildland fire. Wildland fire is an unplanned and uncontrolled fire that's spreading through vegetation, but at times it may involve structures. So this definition mixes together the idea that there's an interface or a place where fire is starting to intrude upon where people work and live and play. Now, we've been trying to control fire on the landscape for many thousands of years. Native persons knew enough that they needed to start fires if there were not fires occurring naturally in order to regenerate the ecosystem. But for the last 150 to 200 years, we've had policy, at least in the United States, as well as many other places around the world, to stop wildland fires before they get big or destructive. And even so, sometimes we've had success, other times we have not. These are a couple of photos from the 1918 fires in Minnesota, which were the most deadly in the state. In any given year, part of the United States is going to burn. Some of the ecosystems in the US are actually fire tolerant, meaning they need fire in order to stay healthy. The fire may expose seeds, it may prevent invasives from getting a foothold, it regenerates the soils, and it changes animal patterns and movement. This is a map showing how often you could expect a fire to occur on the landscape in the US. The cooler colors, the blues and the purples and the grays, are places where fire doesn't occur very often. maybe once every 40 to 200 years. And if you see where the blues and the purples are located, it makes sense. It's right along the northwestern border where there's a whole bunch of water. You see it in the higher elevations of the western and the tip of the northeastern parts of the United States. Locations that have oranges and reds burn more frequently, or at least could be expected to. We see that along the entire southern portion of the US, as well as the Southwest, including California. Here we could expect a fire to occur on the landscape anywhere from 2 to 6 years. Here's another map reflecting how often we see fire on the landscape. Again, the cooler colors, the whites and the yellows, are places that don't often report fires. The oranges and the reds and the browns are places where fires are most frequently reported. Again, you see that the western third of the United States has the most fires, as well as Alaska, along the Gulf of Texas, and the tip of Florida. Over the last 20 years, we've seen that wildland fire, not only here in the US, but globally, is changing. Its behavior is changing. And changing climate has a lot to do with wildland fire behavior. We're starting to see increasing temperatures, longer snow-free seasons, changes in vegetation and how fast it grows, bigger swings between wet and dry periods on the landscape, more intense wind and lightning and storms, and faster drying periods after there is a rain or a snow event. And all of these things contribute to more fire, more intense fire, and fire behavior that is less easy to predict. Take a look at this pie chart of the causes of wildland fire in Minnesota. This chart was actually created from Firewise data, the same kind of data that you'll be creating in later chapters. Notice there are many different slices to the pie chart. Over 90% of wildland fires are human-caused, and that's both here in Minnesota as well as nationally and even globally. In Minnesota, the #1 cause of wildland fire is debris burning. That would be something like raking leaves and sticks in your yard and then setting the pile alight, having it escape or get away, and becoming a wildland fire. Interesting to most people here is the fact that lightning only causes about 2% of Minnesota fires. Most people think that it would be much higher. This ends Chapter 1, What is Wildland Fire?